So here we are, and we're going to start making the PLC code for the final project. Now, what we have here, and one of the things, I don't have my webcam hooked up, but one of the things I'm using a Mark II trainer, so I've got 3 additional switches that I can work with. So I am going to, and my inputs are going to be my start push button, stop, and reset. Then I can use some of these push buttons for my open push button over here and close push button over here. And we'll get into it, but I'm also going to have this fault injection signal. And for my outputs, I'm going to have my 3 lights from the stack light. And when we actually run the code, we'll be taking a look at that, and I will have the webcam. And then I also have these, we have Y1 and Y2. I'm going to make up Y4 and down Y5. And so we're talking about what are the things we're trying to do for here. So I'm going to say when I'm opening the garage door, I'm going to have my green stack light on. When I'm closing it, I'm going to have the yellow stack light on. When it's off, and what we've done in the other ones, when we're not in the start process mode, the red stack light is on. Now, when I'm going up and I press the close push button, I just want it to stop. So that would be the situation where you decided to open the door and then you figured you had something else to do and you changed your mind and you just hit the close push button. We don't want it to close right away. We want it just to stop. When it stops, we can either go to, by pressing it open, it'll open again, or pressing it close, we can close it again. But when we first press the opposite button, we just want it to stop. We also said we're going to have a counter to count complete open and close cycles, and then we want a fault circuit to simulate an object blocking the door and taking too long to close the door. We said that, maybe if for some reason our Jeep was hanging out in here and the door was open and the Jeep was partially out, we'd want to simulate that as a fault because naturally the door couldn't shut. So we're going to simulate that. I'm not sure how good of an idea that was to put that in there, but we'll give it a shot. And when the fault occurs, we're going to, as we have before, we're going to try to blink our red lamp. So those are what we are going to try to do. And we're just going to start out with a brand new project. And so we want to go in here, and I want my 11DRE-D. And what I'm going to start out, well, first I'm just going to put my normal start process. So it's going to be my start push button, X002, and it's going to be my stop push button, which is X001. And I'm okay with that. And now out here, I am going to put my start process. And I'm going to just make that C1. I know we've had it C2 for a long time, but we're just going to do that. Now I'm going to put in my sealant circuit. So I have to go in here, and I'm going to add a row after it. And this will be my C1. So it'll be normally open contact, and it'll be C1. And that's the same thing that we've always had before. Now I'm going in there, and I'm going to line it up. And there. That's that. Now, at the very beginning, I'm going to my address picker, and I'm going to say X001 is stop PB. Then we're going to have start PB. And this one will be reset PB. Now, I'm also going to put in the other ones. So I said that when motor is up, it's going to be C4. So I'm just going to say, motor up. And then C5 will be motor down. So this is when the motor's actually, this is the output from the PLC. This is driving a motor. So we'll just put those in to begin with. And I also need my C1. So I need my start process. So we're going to put in the start process. Okay. So now I want to start with my input signals. And what I'm going to do for some of these is I'm going to put in the actual signal, And then I'm also going to put in a trigger so we can use some of our edge triggers. And, we talked about we can use those for triggering some events, and, it's a good idea, and a lot of times you should be using that. So what I am going to do is I'm going to go in here, I'm going to say my normally open contact. And so my open push button is going to be X005, and I think I actually did these wrong. So what I wanted was well, I'm not going to use this, but this is actually going to be my open PB, and then 6 is going to be my closed PB, and then 7 is where we're going to inject the fault. Fault inject. And that agrees, and I'll say okay, but that's going to agree with this picture here, so fault inject. So right now I'm also going to put in my outputs so I don't mess those up. So we're going to have up motor and down motors 4 and 5. So we've got those in. Well, we'll put those in a bit. So what I'm going to do, first thing is I'm just going to take this out to a contact for an output contact. And I can make this C2, and C2 is going to be my open door. And what I am going to do now is I'm going to take that signal, and I'm going to, well, I have to highlight where I want to put it. And then I'm going to put it, well, actually I don't want it, yeah, I want it to go through, not in a normally open contact. What I want to do is I want to send it through an edge contact. And this will be a rising edge, and again, it'll be my C2 signal. And I'm going to put that into an output, and that'll be my C3 signal. And before I get too lost in these things, I'm going to give these guys names. So C2, well, it's on C3. C2, I'm just going to say open door. And that'll be the signal to open the door after I hit the open push button. Now C3 is going to be, I'm just going to call it open pulse. And that is a pulse that's only going to be high for one scan. Okay, so now I have the option, I can use the actual signal, so as long as I have my finger on that push button, I can use it, or I can use this little shot that's trigger, it's a trigger signal that's only high for one scan, and I can use that to make certain that I'm doing the correct triggering of my signals. So now I'm going to just copy this one. Well, I'm going to copy this rung. I'm going to paste it down here, and that'll be my close push button. And then I'm going to do the same thing down here. I'll copy it, and I'll paste it down here. So now instead of 005, I'm going to make this 6. I'm going to make this, now we're up to C4. And this one changes to C4 also. And I'll make my output C5. And now this also has not so much putting in the trigger pulses, and I'm going to give them names, but one of the advantages of running your output or running your input signals directly into a coil is if I change my inputs, instead of it being X5 and X6, if for some reason it's going to change my pinouts because the cable coming into my PLC has changed, somebody made the wiring wrong or whatever reason, I only have to change it at one spot. I only have to change the definition at the X value. So if I had these two switched, I only have to make this one 5 and 6. I don't really have to go through my PLC code and figure out every place that I would have used that X position because I'm only using it here once. Everything else is referenced to the C2. So if I change the inputs and outputs, all I have to do is just change it at one place and I'm done. And actually in this code, when we're using this open and door, we're probably going to use about 10 different places. So it actually is going to help us out. Now, what I'm going to do for our other inputs, if we look back here, so I've got other inputs, and I'm also going to have this open limit and close limit. So for the open limit and close limit, I'm just going to use memory bits. And so I'm up to C5, and I'll put this for a normally open contact, and I want it over here. And I'll make this C6, and C6 is going to be my open limit switch. And again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing, is I'm just going to run it to an output coil, and then from the output coil, and this will be C7. And then from there, I'm going to run that again through an edge contact, and this will be my C7. And I'm going to run that again to another coil output, and this will be C8. So for the open limit switch, let me just put the definitions in. C6 is going to be the actual input from the switch, so this is going to be my open limit switch, and this is when the garage door is actually open. So I'm just going to say this is open limit, and I'm not going to say switch, and this will be open limit pulse, and that should be good for these guys. And again, what I'm going to do is the same thing for the closed limit switch. So I'm going to copy this rung, and I'm going to paste it down here. And then I'm going to copy this rung and paste it down here. And now, so I have my open limit, and now, let's see, I'm up to 6, 7, 8. So we'll make the open limit 9. Or now this will be closed limit, will be 9. 10 will be the signal here, and then the pulse will be number 11. Okay, and I'm going to put those definitions in now too. So 8 is going to be, or 9 is going to be my close and this is the actual switch. And then we're going to say that this is closed limit. And then for our last one, we'll say closed limit pulse. Okay, so now we've got all of our inputs, and if we look back here, we've kind of got all of these inputs defined. So we've got everything except well, we've got start stop, we've got the open push button, we've got that, we've got our limit switches in here. We don't have the fault inject, but we're going to put that much later, I think. So now let's take a look at what we're going to do when we're opening the door. And we kind of showed this before, but now we're done with our defining the input triggers. So now when I am trying to open the door, so what I want to do is I want to go in there, and I'm going to take the open pulse. So when I'm trying to do this, open pulse is when I'm trying to open the door. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to make this C3. And what I'm going to do is I want these, remember this is just a pulse, this is for one scan, but I want my sealant circuits just to operate with pulses and not with as long as I have my finger on the button. So, and eventually, well, what I'm going to do right now is, so this is going to tie into our Y004. And this will be the up motor, is what we're going to call that. Now, I also want to, well, I'm going to go in there. So we're going, this is the up motor. And actually, at this point, let me just put in the definitions for these Ys. So we're going to start out at Y1. That's going to be our usual red lamp, and then it'll be the yellow lamp and green lamp. And the reason I'm putting this in right now is because we're going to have to kind of uh, cross interlock the up motor and down motor. So we said this is going to be our motor up, and the next one is going to be our motor down. And I'm just going to abbreviate down as DN. So now we have the motor up here, but also we want to make sure that we're not telling it to go up when we're actually going down. So now this needs to be a normally open contact, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to interlock that with the motor down signal. So we cannot go up if we are going down. We're going to have to stop first, and then we can kind of go down. So now we're just put in our seal-in circuit, so we want a row afterwards. And this is going to be our Y004. So it'll be a normally open contact, Y004. And now what is going to break our circuit? So this is our interrupting signal, and this is what we use these pulses for. So we are going to break this up signal when we get the up limit pulse, when we get this open limit pulse, when our open limit switch, when we get the pulse from that. So that'll be C8. Okay, and we'll just line that up, and we'll say we're good. Okay, and now what we're going to do is we're going to do the exact same thing for the motor down, except we're going to have to change all the addresses. So we'll copy and paste, and now instead of the open pulse, we want to find our closed pulse, which is C5. And instead of the motor down, we're going to want the motor up, which is Y4. And again, we're going to, well, we got to change this motor up to motor down as the output, because now we want to go down. And we're going to change the seal-in to motor down too. So that's going to be Y5 also. Now, again, what we need for this one to unlatch it, and we stop the motor down when we get that closed limit pulse. So that is our C11. So we are going to stop that when we get C11. So that is going to be the control for that. Now, we also have one other thing. We have this situation that we can't, well, we have the thing that when we're going up and we press the down button, we want to stop immediately. So we have to come up with a little circuit that is going to do that for us. And what that needs to be is that needs to be just a little pulse that comes out from that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in there and we're going to take our, so when we are going up, so we're going to say when we are going up, so that's going to be Y004, and that'll be our up motor. Now when we press the down push button, so that's the down push button is going to be this little pulse that says we are trying to close. So it's this C5 signal. That is the pulse. So we're just going to have it go for one signal. So that is a normally open signal. And so we want that to be C5. And now again, when we have this, we need to put in parallel with that. So we want a row afterwards. And now we want the normally open contact for our down. So that's C5. And then we want, if we hit the open pulse at the same time, we want it to stop. So the open pulse is right here, C3. So that's a normally open contact also. And the way this is working out, we're going to probably have more videos than I was hoping for. And I think we're going to, we're at 20 minutes, so I might stop this one pretty soon. So what this is going to be is we've got, when we're going up and we say we want to close the door, that's going to be a pulse. And when we're, and same thing when we're going down and we're hit the up button, we're going to stop. So what this is going to be is, I'm going to put a contact in here. And what number are we on? So it looks like we're up to 11. So I'm going to put in C12. And this is going to be, what are we going to call this? So this, we are going to call this stop door pulse. Okay. So when we're going up and we hit the close push button, this close pulse is just a pulse that reflects that we just pressed it. So it's going to put that out. And the same for up and down. So what we want to do is, out here, you know, this is our normal seal-in circuit for going up and going down. So normally we have this open pulse, and if we're not in down, we can get that. So now it's in, this is kind of the state when we actually are going up, and we see this pulse. So what we want to do, this pulse will be high for one scan. So we're going to put it out here. And in these seal-in circuits, what you can do is you can put in this line anything to break it that isn't normally in your seal-in circuit. If you had something like an emergency stop or something, you would put it out here in this area of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to put that as a normally closed contact, and we're going to make that C12. And we are going to do the same thing in this circuit too, and it'll be the same signal, C12. So when that happens, you know, if we're going up, so our motor is going up, and our motor is up, 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 but then we hit the close push button, this is going to go high, and so our motor up circuit is latched in at this point through this lower branch, and we're going to cut it here, which is going to interrupt that, which is going to reflect back here, and our motor is just going to shut off. So it doesn't make a difference if, you know, because this is a pulse, it's going to immediately stop, and it's not going to go down, even though we might still have our fingers on that down push button. You know, it's going to stop the motor where it's at. It's going to stop it, you know, right in its tracks. So now that we have it going up and down, and I'll just talk for a little bit on what we need to do now. The big thing when you're trying to you know, create something from scratch is you need to simulate some stuff. So what I am going to do is when we are going up or down, I need to add, well, first I'm going to add a timer that, and I think I'll just put in a timer here, and I'll just call that T1. And I can kind of talk through where we're going with this. And my set point, I'm going to make this really fast, so it counts pretty fast. So this is 100 milliseconds, which is 10 times a second. So it'll be counting pretty fast. And what I'm going to do down here is I'm going to send it into a counter. And I'll make this CT1. And so I'm going to make this an up and down counter, so that when we're going up, it counts up. When we're going down, it counts down. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the set point 120. So if we are counting at 10 times a second, it will count 12 seconds before it gets to its terminal count. And what I'm going to say is when it gets to 120, that's 12 seconds to actually raise the garage door. And then when we're counting down, it'll count down to 0. When it gets to 0, we're going to say that, yeah, it's fully down. So when it gets to 120, that's when I'm going to say that we've hit, you know, this closed limit switch or the open limit switch. So when we're going up, we're counting up to 120. When it gets to 120, I'm going to have a comparison. And when it gets to 120, I am going to strobe that limit switch. When we're closing the garage door, I'm going to count down from 120. When it gets to 0, I am going to activate that switch. And so here is when you have a little project that you're going to simulate. You can use time counters and timers to actually simulate stuff in the background that you need so that your program can run in a standalone type of system. And I'm going to leave that at that. And this is part one. Part two is, we'll go on, we'll complete these counters and timers. And also what I'm going to do is, now it's counting up to 120. When I visualize my garage door, I'm actually going to show a garage door moving up. And I'm going to have it move up as it's counting from 0 to 120, and then I'm going to have it move down as it's counting from 120 to 0. That type of visualization, it takes some trial and error, but that's what we're going to do. So that is the first video on the actual code that we're doing for this final project, which I guess since we had the introduction, that would make this part two. And then we'll finish up the code next time, and we might actually just try to get it running, and we'll take a look at the troubleshooting that we're going to have, and then we're going to move on. If that works, we're going to move on to the visualization with the HMI. And that'll be a lot of work, but hopefully once we finish this, we'll tie all the, everything in this exercises and everything you've gone through, and hopefully it'll make some good sense. So we'll see you then.